on the 15th, they got another call. And they told Alex Hart to drive to a specified location and deliver the ransom. They just told him that and hung up. Well, there's a problem. Alex didn't drive. So he couldn't go by himself to do that. It was not possible. So there's nothing he could do. He didn't do anything. But the Department of Justice traced the call. And this was early in the days when we just started learning how to trace calls. Back in the early days, if they're going to trace a call, they would have to go where they thought the call was going to go to, talk to all of the operators in the area and tell them, if you get a call at this number, tell us what operator it goes to, tell us what operator, and they were operator, and they actually caught criminals that way using all the operators, which was great. In this case now they had a new technology. They had, they didn't use just the plug-in switchboards, they had something that was a little less manual. So they put an extra line in on the Hart Mansion and did this. They traced it to a San Francisco garage, and Thomas Thurman was there. So they snatched him, and they put him in a cell, and they started basically beating on him, and you know, they were interviewing him to see what was going on, where was it, you know, and finally within 4 hours he broke down and says, well, the guy that did this, the guy that was the mastermind, was at the Hotel California. So they went there and they picked him up. Of course, the minute they picked him up, he says, oh no, Thurman was the mastermind. So they're pushing back and forth on who the mastermind was and who did it. So they smuggled them from San Francisco to San Jose because the folks in San Jose were getting really irate. I mean, this was a family that they really appreciated. A lot of people knew these folks. And so it was really something that people got worked up over. Said, well, let's sneak them in. They placed them in Santa Clara jail. And by then, the kidnappers confessed. Well, word got out about the confession, and they had murdered him. So that really set people off. Newspapers said, kidnappers murdered Hart. Not good. And they claimed it was at the old San Mateo Bridge. So I don't know if any of you remember that old bridge. I sure drove over it a lot of times. Police were dragging the bay. They found nothing. On Sunday, November 26th, Brooks' body was found. So a couple of duck hunters were going through there. That was a big duck hunting area at the time. And they saw a body in 5 foot of water. And it had been tied up with baling wire, and it had a big cinder block tied to it, and the body was pretty well decomposed by then. And he'd also been shot multiple times. So it was sad. Anyway, there was a little bit in between here. So before we get to that, they decided, okay, these guys have to go back to San Francisco. They brought them back to San Francisco just to tell people, hey, they're not in San Jose anymore, because they couldn't hold them back. And then the next night, they brought them back again. Well, people got wind of that. 10,000 people converged on the jail. So this is the old county jail over by St. James Park. And 100 rushed the doors. Well, they had 20 people inside, they had 12 officers outside. The officers outside had sandbags, they had guns, and they had tear gas. So they thought, well, we can keep these people off. So they fired the tear gas. But the people just backed up and then would go again. They just wouldn't, they wouldn't back away. Someone heard gunfire, and then people scattered for a while and then came back at it again. They found they were building the post office there. They found bricks and tiles and rocks, and they started throwing that at the officers. So the officers knew a lot of the people. I mean, San Jose at that time was a small town. They knew a lot of these people, so they didn't want to shoot at them. So they just held back. All they could do was a tear gas. Then they found a large pipe, and you can see in this picture, they've got this large iron pipe. That's a 9-inch pipe. It weighs hundreds of pounds. And they took that, and there were steel doors on on the jail. And they start slamming these things into the door, time after time after time. And finally, the door gave. Then there were screams from all the people, get him. And this was really bad. The cops, they came in, the cops wouldn't shoot. And they started beating on the cops and saying, well, where are these guys? You know, where's Thurman? You know, and so finally, they took control. The two cops that had the keys to the cells, they pulled those out of their pockets and then they ran upstairs to the cells. One was on the 3rd floor, one was on the 2nd floor. So this is Thomas Thurman and John Holmes, the two perpetrators. So immediately, other prisoners realized they were in danger as well.
Yeah.
I mean, how are these guys going to know who these people were? So there was a lot of finger pointing, there was a lot of screaming. They saw one guy who committed manslaughter and said, well, let's string him up too. They finally talked him out of that. The police did, because they said, look, this guy is going to jail anyway. Leave him alone. Just get those two guys. So they found Holmes first on the 2nd floor, and they stripped him down to just a t-shirt and started dragging him out. They looked for Thurman. They couldn't find him. But what happened is they went up to the third floor where his cell was. It was empty. So they started looking around, and somebody says, well, you know, look in the water closet. And so they look in the water closet. No, it's empty. Had a 15-foot ceiling. Somebody looked up, and he had crab crawled all the way up to the top of the ceiling. So then they pulled him down and dragged him away. So they said, string him up. And all of a sudden, there were ropes produced. And this is the area that it was. So you can see over here. So here was the county jail behind the courthouse. And so they pulled them out from here, and the crowd took them out, and they went over here to St. James Park, where there were a number of trees out there.
Oh, they were hung. Oh, my.
So this was Holmes. They lynched him first. And then after he was lynched, they put him on a low tree, and they pulled him up. They did not break his neck, so he basically strangled to death. And then they stripped his pants off just to denigrate him more. Well, that was Thurman, I'm sorry. And then Holmes
Oh, my gosh.
was the other one. And he had already been stripped. And they threw the rope over a taller tree. And they drug him up. And every time they pull him up, he'd grab the rope above the hangman's noose and try to stop from being hung. He said, you know, please, boys, don't hang me, don't hang me. Well, they hung him anyway. And the 3rd time, they yanked the rope and they broke his neck. So it's pretty gruesome. So anyway, so the thing was, I don't know if you know Jim Rolfe, who was Sunny Jim. He was the mayor of San Francisco, later on the governor. He said this is the best lesson California has ever given to the nation. We've shown the country that the state is not going to tolerate kidnapping. Now, this brought a huge uproar of, you know, hey, we're not that kind of state, we're not those kind of people. But it gave a very negative response. So later on, I think he recanted that, but the damage was done. That was the last lynching that we had in a major metropolitan area in California.